The nonprofit MBA purpose is to provide new business insights and fresh creative ideas for executive directors and their teams that will help them improve their organization. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik. I will be your host for today's Nonprofit MBA podcast. And for those of you who don't know me, I am co-founder of Financing Solutions. And for the last 14 years, we are the leading and largest provider of lines of credit for nonprofits in the United States. And, you know, it's really been a great product. People love it. We have 5-star reviews because people really, give us some great feedback about how much it helps them with cash flow. And that's what a line of credit is supposed to do. And it's very hard. If you haven't tried it, it's almost next to impossible to get a line of credit with a commercial bank. They're just not interested in working with nonprofits for various reasons. So if you're interested in learning more about a line of credit for your organization, please visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. And today I'm very excited to be speaking with Josh Bloomfield from GiveCloud. Josh is a passionate innovator and impact-driven leader with over 20 years of experience. His journey, inspired by personal challenges, led him to create solutions that empower nonprofits and donors. A self-taught coder and designer, Josh founded GiveCloud to bridge the digital gap in the nonprofit sector. His multiple patents and awards reflect his commitment to innovation and creating exceptional workplace. Josh, welcome to today's Nonprofit MBA podcast.
Thank you for having me, Stephen.
Yeah, so before we kind of get into today's podcast, or topic, I should say, is, the big news that's going on for the past couple days anyway, has been President Trump stopping funding for nonprofits, or at least putting it on pause, and then of course the courts came in and reinstated it. But it has everybody they're really scared, and we're dealing with clients all the time. The amount of applications we have come in has escalated. It's just incredible, not escalated, wow. Increased incredibly. And, a lot of major newspaper articles. Today, there was one in the New York Times talking about actual nonprofits that did not get the funding they were supposed to get, even after the state imposed a stay. So, what are your thoughts on all this, Josh?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, without getting into the politics of it, it's for me just another reminder of how hard nonprofits have it in funding their mission. These are passionate, impact-oriented nonprofitpreneurs who are often stuck in the gap between trying to make that impact in the world and fund that impact. And really, that's the splash I'm trying to make in the nonprofit space, is help them find more diverse ways to resource their organizations, so they can reliably deliver the kind of impact they feel born to create.
Yeah, that's well put. I mean, I think we're about to come out with an article to talk about what nonprofits can do, and certainly one of the options is to, a good reminder is to find other funding sources. And we'll talk a little bit about GiveCloud, your organization, a little later. I agree with you 100%. It's a challenge. Imagine you're running a business and you have a 3-year contract with somebody to deliver a service or a product, and they call you up and say, you know what, we're just going to cancel that contract. What would you do? And it's incredibly scary. And we'll see how this all comes out. But it affects my organization too, of course. So, we're still giving out lines of credit, but, it's just a wait and see approach. And I think we're all concerned. So today's topic, Trustraising, how it works for fundraising. And so, Josh, you kind of came up a little bit with this topic and title. Tell me a little bit about, what you mean by trust raising.
Well, to kind of to bridge the two topics, I think organizations often struggle to reconcile how to move away from those more secure, seemingly more secure, larger sources of funding. Whether it's a government grant or it's that major donor who's given every year for the last 7 years, and you're expecting it in year 8, but really, who knows? It's daunting to think, how can I offset that revenue? Am I just gonna? I can't just throw up an online form, can I? And expect, if I get $50,000, for example, per year from that one major donor or that one really special grant that you rely on, how many donors donating $25 is it going to take to fill that gap? So, between that challenge and some of my early, career experience, as you had mentioned, I'm a self-taught coder and designer. I had a unique blend of skills that allowed me not to just imagine an ideal customer experience, but then take my programming skills and merchandising skills and design skills and actually bring it to life, whether it was on physical storefronts or whether it was digitally online. And trust raising for me is taking everything I've learned in the for-profit world, the importance of customer experience, the importance of a connection to a brand and to a cause, and bringing that into the nonprofit space, where nonprofits should be able to build really devoted connections with their donors, and donors should feel like it's a gift to give again. That when they give, there's this deep sense of connection to the impact that they're resourcing, the impact that they are funding, and that, it's not just a token $25 donation. It is a real partnership and impact that sees that average donation amount increase. It's kind of a way of thinking. The way I chat with nonprofits about it is, it's about putting the heart before the wallet. It's about putting connection over conversion and delight over data. This real commitment to put the donor first means creating the most delight in that donation experience in order to create the most devoted donor. A delighted donor is a devoted donor. So that's really kind of the base idea of trust raising, focusing on connection rather than conversion and transaction, so that the outcomes for that conversion and that transaction are accelerated and multiplied.
Yeah, it's so true. I think, a lot of our listeners are smaller nonprofits, and that would be defined as under $3 million a year in revenue. And the problem that I often see with smaller nonprofits, let's say under $1 million even, is that they come to this industry wanting to really make a difference in the cause that they're passionate about. The problem is that a lot of founders and executive directors are really good at spending their time and energy at addressing the cause. The problem is where the exec directors and founders need to really spend their time is on fundraising and grants and all the donors and everything like that. You unfortunately you have to leave the helping your cause out, the service part of it, to somebody else, and so you have to build those relationships with your donors. And then the other thing I'll add to this, Josh, and then I'll let you jump in, is so in business, you typically are very worried, as a business owner, when more than certainly 25% of your revenue comes in from one source.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's hard. I mean, if you have, in this case, we're just talking about, like, if you have a 3-year contract with the federal government, and they're providing 100% of your funding, you're thinking, well, it's the federal government, it's guaranteed. We really have never really had an issue in this area, and all of a sudden you get blindsided, and now you have to go spend energy going to, follow, find a diversified funding sources. It's rough, and I get it. But in general, just, in business, you just don't want 25% of your revenue coming from any one client, because that one client could go belly up, and then you're in a lot of trouble. And I would tell you, most small businesses, which are defined as under $5 million a year in revenue, have this major problem of getting all their money from one or two other clients, and it's a real problem. So I think building those great relationships with donors is so important. Tell me how you think you do that.
Yeah, I mean, first off, I want to encourage nonprofits. They don't have it easy. I often like to make parallel analogies between business and nonprofit, because I do think there are similarities. And I do think in ways nonprofits could benefit from a business mindset, a focus on impact and focus on operational excellence and things of that nature. And yet nonprofits have this fundamentally different challenge than businesses do. And, maybe an astute business mind might critique me on this, but there's a stakeholder in business there's a stakeholder in nonprofits that businesses typically don't have to care as much about, which is the donor or the investor. In business, you're primarily concerned with the customer, and the customer is the same stakeholder that is funding the impact. So there's a kind of a one-to-one relationship. There's an accountability there. Businesses almost have inherently more alignment in their operation and in their organization because it's all aligned towards the customer. That's not the case.
I don't know if I agree with you on that, honestly.
Oh,
yeah, because you have, a customer in a business is paying you revenue, money to provide a service.
that's right.
And so you are going now. So you're going to try the best you can to do a great job on the service. You're going to try a great job to listen to your customers and deliver on what you say you're going to deliver.
Absolutely.
Everybody who's in nonprofit thinks it's so much easier running a business, and everybody not in a business thinks it's so much easier potentially running a nonprofit. And I think they're exactly the same. You have to deliver on a service, a product. You have to show, that you're delivering on those results. You got to have measurements. You got to keep your employees happy. You got to keep your relationship with your clients. You have to constantly remind your clients that you are you're delivering on your promise. So I think it's exactly the same. I guess the only thing that we would say is nonprofits don't always have a profit. They actually might, and they just happen to put it back into the organization. And there's many businesses that do that too. What are your thoughts on what I just said, Josh? Any contrary?
Yeah. No, again, I think largely they're the same. But I think the disconnect that exists in nonprofits that doesn't exist in for-profit is the stakeholders. They're different stakeholders. The customer in business is paying for the outcome, and also the recipient of the outcome. In nonprofit world, you've got a donor and you have a beneficiary. They're two completely different stakeholders that you have to navigate and have to manage. And so, of course, from a sales standpoint, as a donor, nonprofits would view the donor as the customer. They're the one funding the impact, and yes, they need to be held accountable to the impact they're creating, and deliver on that impact. But then you have an entirely different stakeholder that you should be operationalized around as well, which is delivering impact and seeing the world change for these individuals. And I just think that that's a unique dynamic in the nonprofit space that doesn't exist in business.
Yeah, I could see the nuance behind it. I really can. I think I've been on nonprofit boards, but I haven't been an executive director. And I guess I would view it as, isn't that my job to represent the funders for my nonprofit? Because what they're trying to do is make an investment in making the cause happen. So almost like the nonprofit is a vehicle to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think I still think it's a very minor conflict, not conflict, but
I guess in my mind, it's the reason why organizations struggle to connect donors with impact, because internally in their organizations, they're operationalized impact this way, and then sales and donor engagement this way. So you end up with organizations that aren't intertwining the two to create this direct connection between donations, funding, and donors and the impact. Instead, you've got a team very specific to delivering impact and a team very specific to speaking with donors, and there's no connection between the two.
Well, that's also, and I agree with you. I get what you're saying. Keep in mind that there's always in business this issue between a sales team and people who are in customer service. So you have conflict all the time, where sales makes we're not getting into the weeds a little bit too much here. So yeah, but so I think that I think any small nonprofit could really, really benefit with the idea of building trust amongst your donors, and that's really the key, because the only way you're going to build trust in your donors is if you show them that you're delivering results. And I think the hardest part of a nonprofit is often showing real definable measurements that you're making an impact, because it's not as obvious a number. And I think that's, as if you really want to satisfy your customer as a nonprofit, you want to really show people this is the outcome of your money. Right. And if you do that, you're going to build trust. You're going to get more money. Mm-hmm. And it actually makes it easier. People really, if they see that their money's really working for them, they're going to increase the amount, as long as your communication is good and, your relationship is good. What are your thoughts on that, Josh?
I think it's directly in line with what's happening in society. I think as our culture in North America is becoming more lonely, more isolated, we spend more time on our devices than we do face to face with individuals. We're not necessarily tech savvy, but we're tech dependent. We're less likely to pick up the phone and order pizza and more likely to open the app and order pizza. So there's these dynamics happening in culture that are making it even more difficult, you could say, to create that connection and close that loop of impact. Or you could be leveraging the exact same types of technologies and experiences that for-profit businesses are using for good. And one of the ways we see that playing out as part of our Trustraising model and as part of the product we build is this idea of kind of commoditizing impact, quantifying impact. I was joking with someone earlier this week about how, I went on a website and I was shopping for clothes, and I felt more of a connection to the clothes order I was making, this hoodie I had ordered, than the donation I had made earlier that week. There's no follow-up. There was no really clear sense of how the money was going to be used, but I trust the individual involved. And so I of course made the donation. But where's the technology platform? Where's the innovator? Where's the influencer that's kind of redeeming today's technology for good? Taking the direction society is going and saying, hold on a second, if we let this get out of hand, we're going to become increasingly more selfish. But what if we could use these exact same tools, these exact same ideas to become more committed to one another, to become more committed to making the world a better place, and to solve problems that only a group of individuals coming together inside an organization can solve? Stephen, you and I could, deliver some food to a neighbor in need, and I'm not diminishing the level of impact we can have on our communities by doing our individual good, but there are unique problems that only a group of people together can solve, and that's what I believe about nonprofits. And so how do we create the connection from the donor to that impact, a true sense of this is where my money's gone and I can see it in action? So I agree with you that that's kind of the direction things are going, but I don't think it's hopeless.
Yeah, I don't think it's hopeless at all. I think incredible opportunities. You have so many tools nowadays. I mean, I sometimes fill in as a professor at teaching entrepreneurship at colleges, and I say to the kids, I've been having my own companies for 30 years, and I say to them, the kids there, I'm like, it has never been easier to be an entrepreneur than it is today. And I would tell you too, there's so many tools out there for nonprofits. I haven't been in a position to say this, to do it. So I'll just say it out loud. You might be able to use that same analogy as an executive director in nonprofits. It has never been easier to be an executive director, to run a nonprofit. Okay. And I know it's controversial because there's a lot of stuff that goes on that gets you hit, but there are just so many tools now that you didn't have 30 years ago. And we are all into this negative thing across the board. Everything. Everybody thinks prices are astronomical. No one's making enough money. There's, and they're not wrong. They're not wrong on many. I can go down the line. Things weren't as good as they were 30 years ago and stuff like that. But I think there's a lot of positive stuff that's out there right now. Let's go to what I want to do is talk about your product, because as the owner of what you're telling us right now, I have a strong hunch that GiveCloud kind of addresses some of what we've talked about. So tell me a little bit about how, what came out, why you designed GiveCloud, what it would really do for nonprofits. And if I'm missing something, please just tell me.
Yeah, sure. There's, kind of two sides of the story. There's, for us, the current challenge nonprofits face and the future challenges nonprofits will face. And I founded GiveCloud with a passion to solve both problems. And so the problem we see today with many nonprofits is, a desire to just launch anything online that meets the bar of digital dependence donors are used to, an online donation experience that has some level of connection, is easy. It doesn't leave the donor abandoned, and it creates that connection, while also making sure all of that data flows seamlessly into their CRM. It's one thing to say, let's launch a new donation form, but when you get into the weeds of what nonprofits have to deal with week in and week out with reconciling bank statements daily to the funds that the cash is associated to thanking the specific donor, to and on and on and on, and then building an appeal to just those donors who gave this time last year to re-up them. You've got to create a list in this software and then export it to that software. And what if I want a custom call to action? So, I mean, these organizations would have to hire, someone with an MBA of some sort to connect these dots and solve these problems. So why isn't there a tool that connects these dots for them? And you know what? While we're building it, why not make sure you don't have to switch all your tools? Who wants to spend tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars and a year switching their software just to make a more modern giving experience? Why not just add something onto your current technology stack? And so that's part of why we've partnered with some of the biggest nonprofit CRMs in the space, so that our pitch to nonprofits can be, hey, listen, we're here to help. We're not here to switch you and to migrate you. We are here to help you in your current platform. We know that what's frustrating you is just that top 10% of that platform that just doesn't let you engage the way you wish. We've got you. Then there's kind of the future of giving. And this is what I hinted at with commoditizing impact. Why can't I feel the same degree of connection I might feel shopping for something online, seeing my order confirmation email? I know exactly what I'm getting. There's no confusion. I'm getting an update on my tracking. I'm refreshing the page. I'm looking out my window to see if the truck's here yet with my delivery, and then I get that impact. Why doesn't that same supply chain exists in the nonprofit space? And so that's why we created our product Cosmos. And so what Cosmos does is it allows organizations to launch forms that are focused on impact instead of a donation. So imagine, we did a pilot project with a local toy parade, and their previous donation form just had a field where you typed in an amount of money. But on our new donation form, instead, we displayed images and an icon for a toy, and a plus and minus to increase the amount of toys. So instantly, the donor's thinking to themselves, oh, right, I'm not here to give a $25 donation. I'm here to give toys. And just off to the right, they could see faded children. So you swipe over on your phone. Again, an experience we're all used to on our devices, yet something nonprofits typically don't take advantage of. And now I'm looking at what it would take to sponsor an entire child's Christmas. But now I'm also seeing a toy on this side, child on this side, and then over here I'm seeing this hint at a family. And now I've swiped over to family, and now I'm having a conversation with my family about what it would look like to sponsor another family. This entire conversation is about impact. It's not about money. And it's not until the donor hits next do we surface how to finance that impact. And there could be some overlap, by the way, with what you do. And I'm actually curious to dig into that perhaps. But, hey, it's gonna cost $300 today to create that impact. Or it could cost $30 over 10 months, or it could cost $60 over 5 months. And now they're having a conversation with their spouse going, hey, I think we can actually afford to do 3 or 4 families if we finance it this way and did that. And then on the after the transaction's completed, the donor's faced with a possible upsell. Hey, do you want to double or triple your impact? And not by changing the amount they give, but just by extending the timeline of their recurring giving. And so in a world where you and I were chatting earlier about diversifying impact, but also creating sustainable impact, in this model, not only are you creating a deeper connection to your donors, you're lifting the average donation amount, and you're doing that across a recurring gift, which is the kind of devotion that nonprofits are looking for, and it's the kind of delight that donors are looking for. So that's the product I'm most excited about. But the reality is that today a lot of nonprofits struggle to quantify their impact. And that's one thing that's required in order to kind of commoditize the impact and just say it in plain terms, like how many toys, right? Like if you are an organization that builds homes, for example, you might think it's obvious to say, well, wouldn't the impact items be like, boxes of nails or maybe sheets of drywall? But the problem there is that impact becomes so so narrowly and finely scoped that organizations might feel they're running into designation issues. Well, I can only spend this on drywall. So you've got to increase the scope, not so much that it's vague, but enough that it's this believable amount of impact, like perhaps, square foot of safe housing or things of that nature. So it does take some time for nonprofits to kind of acclimatize themselves to this type of communication and this type of quantification, I suppose, of their impact.
So let me ask you a question.
Please.
Have you done any studies that showed clients that how much they raised in their organizations before they used your product, and then after they used your product, the increase or decrease in in revenue, donations that came in? Have you done any studies like that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've done a handful on a handful of different features. So the specific feature I just walked through with the impact, this organization tripled the amount that they had targeted to fundraise that year and lifted their average donation amount by about 200%. But organizations on average typically see a 40% increase in their conversion rates. They typically see about a 70% increase on their digital fundraising after year one of using our product. And there's a variety of reasons for that I can get into. Creating an engaging digital experience is nuanced. Organizations don't love hearing words like AI or words like gamification. And yet these are tools that help us more efficiently process data and understand the motivations of donors so that we can leverage that motivation and pour into that motivation, accelerate that motivation, lifting the donor's devotion throughout the transaction in order to create these outcomes, these higher retention rates, these higher conversion rates to monthly donors, and outcomes like that.
Yeah, yeah. Listen. The comment I would make is, over the years, decades, I see such a huge difference in when you select the right type of software, product for your organization. And one of the reasons why it can make such a big impact is that company that produced that software typically is an expert in that field. And they're not just selling you that software, they're giving you best practices for, in this case, fundraising, donor engagement, best practices for, for the last several years, the big thing has been sustainable giving. Instead of getting one donation once, converting that into a monthly donation, which gives you 50% or more revenue over a longer period of times and helps you better with cash flow as well. So, that's what vendors that specialize in certain things give you. Sure, could you put a donation button up on your website and try to manage it yourself manually? That's a start, but don't go there. You got vendors like Josh, who's been doing this for a really long time, and then the other thing is they're dealing with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other nonprofits that have the same problem as you do. So, that's what I've seen when I've made software. And I don't care if you use Josh's products or not, but I'm just saying in general, my experience is selecting really good software vendors makes a huge impact. I did that when I switched to a different CRM product and I saw an incredible improvement.
Yeah.
So Josh, let me ask you this before we kind of wrap it up. It's kind of a new segment that I'm trying to kind of implement in my podcast, and I'm still working with how to word it. But what do you think about getting a line of credit for a nonprofit? when and you can say whatever you think about it. Do you have any experience with it? Do you think it's a bad idea? Do you think it's a good idea? What do you think?
I haven't heard of it, but I know one of the features we are hungry to create in our product is this ability to finance impact, and I've always wondered, what's the gap there? Why aren't there companies saying, "Listen, if you are able to, well, hey, listen, let's do the business example. In business, I can get a loan based on, and I'm not sure how your line of credit system works, or but just commenting high level on lines of credit for nonprofits. In business, I can do this. I can go get a line of credit valued at some calculation that matches how many recurring customers I have. It makes complete sense to me that there would be a similar mechanism in the nonprofit world, allowing nonprofits to take advantage of the resourcing and the commitment that they know is coming from committed donors, devoted donors, but being able to use that in a timeline within their operations at a time that it makes most sense. Because I also know from business, timing is of the essence. If you don't serve that beneficiary in that moment at that time, if you miss that opportunity, you could forfeit future opportunity and future impact. And being able to be ready at a moment's notice to, in my situation, respond to the market, but in a nonprofit situation, respond to need. Man, it feels like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, so a couple comments. The first thing, you're absolutely right. The fact, the number one thing that we look at is what we determine as future receivables. So for nonprofits, it's we're no, I don't want to get in the weeds too much on this, but it is next to impossible for a nonprofit to get approved for a line of credit with a commercial or local bank, and there's various reasons. It's not worth getting into. One of the main things is you have to understand how hard it is for a small business under $10 million in revenue to get approved for a line of credit. But having said that, one of the things that a bank will look at is what you're talking about, your customers and your revenue, right? Because all banks want collateral, which is an asset that they can sell if you default. Now, our particular line of credit is unsecured. So that means we do not require an asset. But what we are doing is just seeing, what your revenue has been, and if we think the revenue is going to continue, and that's the key ingredient. And so, having a line of credit, very valuable for people who have uneven cash flow. It's so common. And by the way, like the number one biggest reason why people use line of credit is to make payroll, which is illegal to miss. You can't miss payroll. It's illegal to do so, and so that's the number one reason why people use it. But there's other things too. But
I'm curious, Stephen, what would you say to someone listening who would think to themselves, "Oh, my donors would cringe if they knew I took out a line of credit," or X or Y stakeholder, I don't know if they'd love that. Like, what story would they tell their stakeholder or their donor around the importance of a line of credit for their organization?
Every donor, and they all have a business sense that they know that a line of credit is extremely valuable to an organization up and down in cash flow. So I've never, ever heard of that as an objection from any of our clients. And we're the largest provider. So that's not really something you hear ever. It's just the cost of running. It's just like saying, why do executive directors get a salary? I mean, because you got to live, So, that's not really in fact. I think our number one referrals are from the board of the nonprofit, where somebody on board says, "Hey, you got to get a line of credit." And then they, it's funny because they all do this. They call us because we're the number one search for nonprofit line of credit. I tell them, I say, is you're going to go look, you're going to find that the banks aren't going to say, they're all going to say no. And, And not that they don't always come back. They always, they do their research and they find out that we're one of kind of the only company that really will work with them. And our terms and conditions are great. So so you just don't see that. It's a great tool, and I'm not trying to sell anything here. You either can use our services or you can't. I don't really care. So that's kind of the what we've seen out there. It's a great product. So anyway, Josh, going to kind of wrap it up. If people want to reach out to you, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, they can search me on LinkedIn. They can go to my website. That's givecloud.com. I'm on Instagram as well. And those would be the best ways to connect. Or you can drop me an email, josh@givecloud.com. Stephen, man, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. From our debate to what you do in business, nonprofits deserve an advocate like you who can understand how to tie these pieces of business and acceleration and growth and operations to impact in the world. And man, honored to have been part of the MBA podcast.
Yeah, thanks for being on. It was fun. So if anybody is looking for a line of credit for their business, please feel free to reach out to us and you can just visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. You can get a free quote so you can see exactly how much you qualify for. If you qualify, it takes less than 2 minutes. And you can read about us too there as well. And before we wrap everything up, I also want to let everybody know, I always end the podcast this way. Nonprofits, executive directors, and their staff are really doing an incredible job of trying to solve problems. And I just want to remind you all that this is a marathon and not a sprint. And the number one thing you need to be taking care of every single day is yourself. You can't help your family, your employees, or your cause if you don't take care of yourself, because solving world problems is a long range goal. And so don't burn out. It happens a lot. And you need to think about yourself. What do you need to do today? That's the first thing I think of. What do I need to do? For me, particularly, it's exercise. I always think the night before, what time of the day can I exercise tomorrow? Because that keeps me sane. But it could be praying, meditating, spending time with your family. That has to come first. And so please try to prioritize that in the new year, which is what we're in right now. Other than that, I want to thank Josh for coming on, and thank you all for making the world a better place. And please refer people to our website. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. The podcast. We have some really great guests like Josh. Have a great day, everybody. See you later.